For thousands of years, humanity accepted death as unavoidable, a final boundary, a limitation no one could overcome. But what if death was never a necessity, only a technical problem waiting to be solved? Welcome to Eterna, the world's first complete consciousness transfer experience. Preserve your memories, preserve your personality, preserve your relationships. Continue your life in a limitless digital reality, designed entirely around you. No disease, no aging, no pain, no endings. Explore infinite worlds. Reunite with those you love. Build, create, and live without time. Because the greatest breakthrough in human history is not artificial intelligence. It is you. Eterna. Live forever.
The commercial ended, and honestly, if I were sitting in that room, I probably would have been a little tempted too. The screen at the front of the senior residence slowly faded to black, and for a few seconds nobody said anything. You could almost feel the thought hanging in the air. What if death really was optional? The common room looked exactly like what you'd expect in the future. Large, smart windows stretched from floor to ceiling, showing a perfectly maintained city skyline in the distance. Soft lighting adjusted automatically depending on where people were sitting. Medical sensors were built into the chairs. Even the coffee machines quietly rolled themselves back into the wall when they weren't being used. Everything was sleek. Everything was calm. Everything felt just a little too perfect. Daniel sat near the back with his arms crossed. He was 82 years old. His hair was white, his hands shook slightly when he moved, and his lungs weren't doing him any favors anymore. But his mind? Still sharp as ever. And Daniel had the kind of face that said,
"I've lived long enough to know when someone is selling me something."
At the front of the room stood a representative from Eterna. She looked exactly like the type of person you'd trust with your future. Perfect posture, silver gray suit, warm smile, calm voice. The kind of woman who could explain the end of death the same way someone else might explain a new phone plan.
"Well,"
she said, clasping her hands together,
"as of this year, over 12 million individuals have successfully preserved their consciousness through Eterna."
A holographic display lit up behind her, showing smiling families, glowing digital landscapes, and the company's slogan, "Live forever. No more goodbyes." A few people in the room actually gasped. And to be fair, if you're 80 years old and your body hurts every morning, that message hits a little differently. Margaret, who sat in the front row with a knitted blue blanket over her legs, wiped her eyes.
"If I could see Harold again,"
she whispered,
"I'd sign up right now."
Harold had been her husband for 52 years. Frank, who complained about his knees every single day, gave a small laugh.
No arthritis, no medication, no waking up feeling like my spine got hit by a truck. I'm in.
A few people chuckled. Then Eleanor spoke, her voice barely above a whisper.
"I'm not afraid of dying,"
she said.
"I'm afraid of just stopping."
The presenter turned to her with that same perfectly measured smile.
"And that,"
she said,
"is exactly what we've solved."
Now, if I'm being honest, this is the part where a lot of people in that room stopped thinking critically. Because the promise was incredibly seductive. No pain, no aging, no funerals, no final breath, just continuation. Robert, a retired engineer who still got excited about anything involving technology, leaned forward like a kid seeing a spaceship for the first time.
"This is the greatest invention in human history,"
he said. The presenter nodded.
"We believe so too."
Small tablets unfolded from the arms of everyone's chairs. A glowing button appeared. "Begin your consultation." And just like that, people started pressing it. One by one. Margaret, Frank, Eleanor, Robert. Hope spread through the room so quickly it almost felt contagious. But Daniel didn't touch his screen. He kept staring at the presenter. Then he raised his hand. The room grew quiet. The presenter smiled.
"Yes, Daniel?"
He leaned forward slightly.
You say my memories are copied.
That's correct.
You say my personality is copied.
That's correct.
You say every thought I've ever had is preserved.
That's correct.
Daniel nodded once. Then he asked the one question nobody else seemed to be asking.
How do you know the one who wakes up is actually me?
And just like that, the room went silent. Even the people who had already started signing up stopped tapping their screens. For the first time, the presenter hesitated. Only for a second. But Daniel noticed. Then she smiled again.
Because every measurable part of your consciousness is transferred with complete accuracy.
Daniel tilted his head slightly.
That's a very polished answer,
He said.
but it didn't answer my question.
A few people shifted uncomfortably. The presenter kept her tone calm.
From every practical perspective,
She said.
the consciousness that continues will be indistinguishable from you.
And there it was. Indistinguishable. Not identical. Not the same. Just impossible to tell apart. Daniel leaned back in his chair and folded his arms again. Around him, people resumed filling out their forms. Some were crying. Some were smiling. Some looked like they had just been handed a second chance at life. And honestly, I understood them. Because when your body is slowly shutting down, when your friends are disappearing one by one, when you know you're closer to the end than the beginning, the promise of forever is incredibly hard to resist. The presenter stepped forward and spread her hands.
For those who choose Eterna,
She said.
this is not the end of your story.
People lined up immediately to schedule their scans. Margaret was first. Frank was right behind her. Eleanor looked like she had already decided. Daniel stayed exactly where he was, watching, thinking. And for the first time in his life, he began to wonder whether death might actually be the less frightening option. Over the next few weeks, the Eterna representatives became a regular part of life at the residence. They set up sleek consultation rooms with curved glass walls and floating displays that explained the upload process in soothing detail. Residents began disappearing from the dining hall one by one, not because they had died, but because they had scheduled their transition. And strangely enough, many of them seemed happier afterward. Margaret practically glowed. Every time Daniel passed her in the hallway, she talked about Harold as if she were already packing for a reunion. Frank stopped complaining about his joints and started making jokes about finally trading his knees in for a
Cloud-based upgrade.
Even Eleanor, who had once been terrified of simply ceasing to exist, slept better knowing that, according to Eterna, she wouldn't. Daniel remained unconvinced. But he couldn't ignore one thing. His body was getting worse. The coughing fits lasted longer now. Walking from his room to the dining hall left him breathless. Some mornings, even getting out of bed felt like negotiating with a machine that no longer wanted to cooperate.
And then there was Emma, his granddaughter. 12 years old, endlessly curious, and the one person who still made him feel like the world had something left to offer. She visited every Sunday, always carrying too many questions and some new gadget she wanted to explain to him. One evening, while the two of them sat by the window in his room watching delivery drones cross the city skyline, Emma looked up from her tablet. "Grandpa,"
she said quietly.
"Mom says you're getting sicker."
Daniel smiled faintly.
Your mother worries.
Emma hesitated. Then she asked the question he had been avoiding.
"If you do the upload, does that mean you won't leave?"
Daniel stared out at the city lights. For a moment, he didn't answer. Emma climbed onto the arm of his chair and rested her head against his shoulder.
"I don't want to forget your voice,"
she whispered. That sentence hit him harder than any diagnosis ever had. Not because he was afraid of death, but because he suddenly understood what death would take from the people he loved. A week later, Margaret completed her transition. The staff held a small celebration in the common room. Her family gathered around a large screen as her digital self appeared in a beautiful simulated garden, smiling and waving.
I'm here.
She said. Her children cried. The room applauded. Daniel watched from the back, and for the first time the question was no longer whether he believed the technology. The question was whether he was willing to risk losing the chance to stay. That night, he sat alone in his room long after the lights had dimmed. He replayed Emma's words again and again. I don't want to forget your voice. The next morning, Daniel walked into the Eterna consultation suite. The same presenter looked up and smiled as if she had known he would eventually arrive. Daniel lowered himself into the chair across from her.
I still think your answer doesn't make sense,
he said. The presenter nodded.
That is a common concern.
Daniel exhaled slowly.
Maybe,
he said.
But if there's even a chance that some part of me gets to stay with my granddaughter.
He paused, looking down at his trembling hands.
Then I suppose that chance is worth taking.
The presenter slid a sleek agreement across the table.
Welcome to Eterna, Daniel.
He stared at the glowing signature line for several seconds. Then, with a hand that shook more than he wanted to admit, he signed his name. And in that moment, Daniel made the same decision millions before him had made. He chose hope over certainty, and he had no idea what was waiting on the other side. Daniel expected death to feel dramatic. Maybe there would be a bright light, maybe a tunnel. Maybe his entire life would flash before his eyes like people always said. But when the day finally came, it was surprisingly ordinary. The upload procedure took place in one of Eterna's transition suites, a room so clean and elegant it felt more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. Soft music played from hidden speakers. The walls displayed slow-moving digital landscapes. The chair he sat in looked less like a machine and more like something designed to convince people that nothing frightening was about to happen. The technicians spoke in calm, reassuring voices.
Just relax, Daniel. You may feel a slight sensation. Most people describe the experience as peaceful.
Emma was there with her parents, standing behind the glass partition, trying to be brave, trying not to cry. Daniel looked at her one last time and smiled.
Don't forget my voice,
he said. Emma wiped her eyes and nodded. The device lowered over his head. A soft hum filled the room. Lights flickered gently across his vision. And then, everything went dark.